music has always been a very mysterious thing, I think, to a lot of filmmakers, in that, where does it come from? And how do you can't talk about music. You know, you can't talk about what it's going to sound like, what this melody is going to sound like. It'd be like trying to describe a color.
Όλοι φυσικά ξέρετε τις ταινίες Robocop, Κόναν ο Βάρβαρος, Ελευθερώστε το Γουίλι, τη Γαλάζια Λίμνη με την Μπρουκ Σίλς, τη διάσημη τηλεοπτική σειρά Λάση. Αυτό που πιθανόν δεν ξέρετε είναι ότι τη μουσική για όλες αυτές τις ταινίες την έχει γράψει ένας Έλληνας. Λέγεται Βασίλης Πολυδουρης. You are born here.
Yes.
You are born in
Yes,
California.
no, I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, and then I was 6 months old when we moved to California.
And your parents?
My father was born in Kalamata, in the Peloponnesus, and my mother's father was born also in the Peloponnesus, and her mother was born in Sicily, and she was born in the United States. Probably the most well-known of the albums, because of course we have record albums on some of the movies that come out, is the Free Willy music. Michael Jackson had a song in the film, and that went on the album, and of course it helped it a terrific amount. I think that's very well-known music of mine. Conan the Barbarian seems to be doing very well. I wrote the music for that 20 years ago, and it still sells very well. Particularly in Europe, the music, people seem to respond to it very well. I think because it sounds very classical, but yet it also sounds modern at the same time. And it's mythology, and I think that it lives forever. It wasn't written to represent the 1970s or the 1980s, so it has much more of a, I think it has more of a universal appeal, time-wise. Also the music that I wrote for the Olympics, the last 1976 Olympics. So many people saw it. Because 96, I'm sorry. Yes, and but I think that the television audience was 1 billion people. I mean, it was a huge amount of people that were tuned into the opening ceremonies, and I wrote the music that represented the ancient games. I would very much love to be involved with the Olympic Games that are going to be in Athens. I think that if somebody works on a film that's well known, and you know, millions of people see it, then the work will become more popular. When I start a film, when any of us, anybody who works in pictures, we don't know if the film's going to be successful, or that audiences are going to like it or love it. There has to be something in the film that appeals to the people that are working on it, you know, and then you bring that to the picture. What happens after that, it's out of our control.
Welcome, shopper. Let's take a stroll through your new home. This is a one-family house built by ZM Industries, situated near schools and shopping centers. This progressive
Robocop
development has
representing
growth
a
factors
machine who's also a man. So it's sort of 50% synthesizer, 50% orchestra. When I presented that idea to Paul about using, you know, rhythm and perhaps a very modern sound, I wasn't sure if he was going to fire me on the spot, because that was exactly what he didn't want.
Wow. Can you do that, Dad?
It was quite the opposite. What he wanted was something that would represent the human reality of the characters, because they're in a situation which is very technological. You have spaceships, and you have modern warfare, you have these weapons of destruction, highly advanced, and he wanted the music to represent more of the human side of the movie. The sound effects for the bugs were all digitally produced with digital sound. And they're very harsh, because of course bug noises for 600-pound animals don't exist. I mean, you know, fortunately there aren't 600-pound bugs, but they're very harsh sounds. They're very fierce, and they kind of rip into you. You know, they're very visceral. They have a very visceral impact upon your ear and your body when you feel these things. So he wanted the music to be real music, and for that reason I used a very large orchestra, and that kind of kept the human element alive in the film. RoboCop was very different. It was very different from the requirements of this picture, because RoboCop was about a man who becomes a machine, who then realizes that he was a man at one point. So it has this kind of motion like this. And RoboCop, what he wanted to do was represent what it would be like if a human being was trapped inside of a machine. And that's really what the character who plays RoboCop, his realization is halfway through the film, that, my God, I used to be a man. And then it's like, how does he deal with that, and how does he use what he knows as being a human being in the body of a machine? That was kind of difficult, and basically I solved that problem, and we solved it together, by having the synthesized music, electronic music, represent the machine elements of the character, and the orchestra represented the human elements. So there's kind of a theme of his being a human being, and then there's also a theme of what it's like to be this very powerful machine at the same time.
When do you compose the final music?
It depends. Oftentimes, directors will call me before they've even started shooting the movie. John Milius, who I've worked with, I've done a number of movies, he writes his own movies, and when he's writing them, he calls me in and he wants me to develop themes for the film. Oftentimes that'll help him get to the next scene, or he'll understand a character a little differently. But in the case of John, he likes to have the themes played just like on a piano on a little tape recorder when he's shooting the films. When we did Conan the Barbarian, he played back some of the pieces of music so that the actors could move in a certain rhythm. There would be a certain speed. There's a processional in one film, in Conan. He's got about, I don't know, 1,000 people walking up a mountain. Well, he played the music so that they would have the same steady rhythm going along with that. So that's very important to directors like John Milius. Randall Kleiser's another director who likes to have the music, likes to have the themes. I did the Blue Lagoon with Randall, and he had the themes when he was shooting the movie. So they kind of planned the camera moves, because it was basically a montage about an island, two kids growing up on an island, and there were all these beautiful camera moves and it was very fluid, so I think the music helped him do that. It's often more than just one character in a film. I think what we try to do with music is represent the whole film, the entire concept of what the drama is. I think, you know, who does that so well is Nino Rota. Did some wonderful work. You think of the films that he scored for Fellini, where one theme, like in 8½, there's one theme which you can play anywhere in the movie, and you know that that's that movie. The Godfather is the same way. You know, they use that theme, the Godfather theme, anywhere in the film because it's so much. It is that film. I mean, he sums up the movie in one melody. I think it's important for me as an artist to be able to work in many different styles. You know, yes, I can do violent films, and I can do love stories that are very tender and very emotional. I think all these emotions are contained within all of us, you know, and sometimes you just have to. I've never killed anybody, so I don't really know what it's like to commit murder. But yet, when I write music for somebody who's murdering somebody, I mean, there's the Stanislavski used to call it the magic what if. What if I were a murderer, what would I feel like? And then I have to think about what that's like and then figure out what the music would sound like because I was doing that kind of a thing. But I think it's very important to do as many different styles as possible. The danger in Hollywood is that you do one kind of film and it's very easy. Then they say, oh, that's the person who writes the music for action films or violent films. And then you've passed over for all the more gentle love stories or romantic films. And so I've consciously tried to work in as many different genres as possible. I like films about humans. I mean, things that are real. In terms of emotions and in terms of the interaction of human beings. I think if there's a preference, I do prefer films that are mythologically based, that have a sense of mythology to them, because I think mythology is a very useful tool for understanding our own characters, our own emotions. Music is probably most important in films which have not a tremendous amount of dialogue in them. You need to hear characters speaking, and you don't want to mess that up with music. I'd say primarily visual films, primarily films that need moods and places created for them, like science fiction, where we don't really know what that sounds like. Films in the past where you want to make a strong sense of the place and the time, period films, let's say. I like the films of Fellini. I like the films of Antonioni. I think particularly love the films of Michael Kokianis and Jules Dassin for that reason. I think they were about people. You know, it wasn't about some marvelous technical advancement. It wasn't about some spaceship coming down to Earth. It was about the way people have to interact and relate to each other. The Blue Lagoon score tried to capture this kind of innocence with these two children who were stranded on an island, and in a way it's kind of an old-fashioned film score. It's almost like, you know, Max Steiner would do an island romance in 1940 or 1930. Because, again, it was a period piece. I mean, it was set in the 1800s, and I don't know, orchestrals are very romantic, you know, and it needed to be romantic, and it needed to be lush and represent the sea, and there was a lot of music because, again, it was a montage. There's very little dialogue in the picture.
You are romantic?
Yes, absolutely. Romanticism takes the curse off of everything, you know. Wind was a very important film for me to have done. In fact, I chased after the poor director forever. At least a year when I heard they were making this movie. I knew I had to, you know, I was born to write the music for that movie. And
he asked from you, or you asked for him?
I asked for him, and it's rare that I will do that, because I tend to be very shy and I don't make phone calls and, you know, talk to people about it. But this one I knew I had to. Carol Ballard was working in San Francisco on the picture, and I went up there and just sort of sat in front of the office and, you know, and said, "Mr. Ballard, I really want to write the music for this movie." Actually, I started sailing about the same time I started studying music. I was 7 years old. And so the two things are very, very close to each other for me. I think there's some interesting parallels between sailing and writing music, because in sailing you have currents and the wind shifts and you have to tack. So it's like you can't really plan your destination and when you're going to get there very carefully. And in music it's the same thing. Sometimes where you think the music's going to take you isn't that. I mean, you know, you sort of have to get there by note. And then if it detours, then you have to go along with it because it feels right. The last film I did was Starship Troopers. It was directed by Paul Verhoeven. Science fiction film. It's based on a book by Heinlein, the writer. I think he wrote it in the 50s. And it's set in 400 years in the future. It's about Earth has become sort of a global village. You know, there's one government, one people. So we don't have any kind of nationalism. There's no patriotism in that sense that there is today and has been in the past. And basically it's about Earth is being threatened by a society of bugs, spiders, and very large creatures that are sending meteorites towards the Earth. So they have to recruit young people to go to war. It's really the story about propaganda. It's a story about how a government uses the propaganda to convince people that they need to go to war and fight and kill each other. And in this case, they're killing bugs. But nonetheless, it has all that violence and terror in it. And then, of course, there's a love story in the film. What's a film without a love story? And a lot of computer-generated effects. This was first, I think this has more computer effects in it than any film until its time. So what we have are bugs that are 30 feet tall. They weigh 600 pounds, and you have actors reacting to, you know, these gigantic things. It's pretty extraordinary. The visuals are absolutely beautiful in their terror. And this is something that Verhoeven likes to get into a lot, I think, is how humans, you know, how human beings react when they're in extraordinary situations. Well, this was a difficult film to write. In fact, I was on it for a total of 8 months, which is a very long time for film composers. Generally, we get 6 to 12 weeks is our normal involvement in any movie. So I had to be involved when they actually shot that particular scene. At that point, I started thinking about what the score might be for this kind of futuristic space film. And my initial instincts were, let's go with synthesizers and a lot of drums and percussion and give it a real kind of futuristic, updated, almost pop sound.
You know, the second song
Well, I think I compose a lot like my father. Same, except for on a guitar, instead of not the piano, but on a guitar, with a real basic melody first, just one melody first, like you play.
Sometimes I say it's time again after 5 when it's okay, have 1 or 2.
I sang on top of it with other melodies, and then put all the and then because I think because I'm younger, it's like rock music instead of orchestra. This? No.
It's your first film.
First film, first movie.
But not the first song she ever wrote.
It's one of the first songs I ever wrote, though. Yeah, one of the first. Definitely the first one that was fully produced. That sounds that good.
No, I didn't want to be involved in it. You know, it's her music, and you can only hear it one way. You know, the only person that knows what it's supposed to sound like is the person that writes it. So, you know, I could have come in and put all kinds of violins and silly things on top of it, but wouldn't have been right. Wouldn't have been hers then. The director chose this song because the movie's set 400 years in the future, but he didn't want something that sounded like it was, you know, futuristic in the sense, but he did want something that nobody had ever heard before. And I think he was taken by her vocal styles more than anything with it. It sounds like it's today, but it's very fresh. It's very different from what we hear today, I think. And that's what he responded to. And also the lyrics. There's the lyric is that I can take you into it.
We could both turn into it,
Right.
like roll over, play dead.
And it's really this girl is very much in love with this boy in the picture, and he doesn't care for her. So it's kind of like her telling him he's really stupid not to be paying attention to her. And I think he responded to that in that lyric.
Yeah, well, it's the attitude of the song.
Absolutely.
Is very much fitting to the characters in the movie. I'm going to work on an album. Yeah, I've written quite a few songs in the last couple of years and decided to put them all down. And I've built my own studio at my house. You know, not as big as this, but kind of like half of it or a third of it. And you're going to help me.
If you would let me, I'd love to.
I want him to help me.
It'd be cool. Yeah, absolutely. But she'll do the writing. I'm just going to help her produce the music.
Well, you were saying before, I mean, I think that you really understand what the music is about, you know, like where I'm coming from a lot. I think that when I sing something, he's the first person to understand what I really want, what I mean, and what I want it to sound like. And I think it'll be easy to work together because
We'll see.
kind of coming from the same place, hopefully, right?
Yeah, we'll see. The strength of the music and the strength of the films that are being made in Hollywood really go back to the strength of the directors. If you have a very powerful director, and power is really based in Hollywood on how well the last film, you know, how much money it made. And that's kind of the way it works. Music is the last opportunity the director has to explain to his audience or her audience what their intentions were. It's the last thing they can do to change the film is with the music.